Yo, vatos, thanks again for tuning into yet another video. Infamous coming at you from the studio. We're doing a little bit of voiceover. I did have some company, so I was talking and didn't get to film that in the video. But just a quick little uninstall of the air filter of your air breather, and there it is. I have already done the external air breather mod on the Screaming Eagle ventilator air breather, and it works. The air breather is clean. I have maybe about 600 miles. Super excited about the SNS air breather. So I just couldn't finish doing this this mod, but I was able to go ahead and utilize this external air breather with the SNS, and I'll show you what I did. And I reused the factory air breather. So if you're out there and you have an SNS and you don't want to drill into your manifold or into your air breather and destroy it, you don't have to drill into it. You just use your original air breather bolts. And here you see I am using some red grease to hold the O-ring, and I already put that backing plate for the sensor on the manifold. And this is just, like I said, just to kind of cut back on time, and just go ahead and use the supplied Loctite on all your bolts. Everything that you put on, SNS recommends Loctite on everything, even on the breather bolts. So that's what I did. I put a little dab of Loctite on the screws, on the bolts, whatever you want to call them, and on the breather bolts. And always hand thread the bolts. You always want to go off of feel. You do not want to cross thread anything, especially on just anything overall. You do not want to give yourself more work, and use those rubber washers that you're supplied with by SNS, one in the front and one in the back. And as you can see, I'm using the stock air breather bolts. Like I mentioned, this is the way to do it without drilling into your backing plate or whatever you call it on the air breather. And as you can see, a little bit of Loctite, just a dab. Don't fully thread them in. Just like I said, you just put a little bit in there. Evenly tighten down all these bolts. You do not want to go crazy on one side. By the time you tighten one side and then you start going on the other side, you will eventually break something. So evenly tighten down all the bolts, even the breather bolts. Nothing's tightened down fully. I'm still going one at a time, kind of a clockwork or star pattern. And like I said, evenly tighten down. Make sure everything sits on the threads and everything. Nothing's over tightened. And then once you have everything kind of seated, once you have everything kind of touching, that's when you start kind of going back. And like I said, just go in a star pattern, evenly tighten down everything. You do not want to break anything. This is pretty much the finish line. Like I said, you do not want to give yourself more work. Alright, so now we're moving on to the external air breather. I'm using the same parts, everything the same from the original video. If you guys haven't seen that video, go ahead and search that video. We are using all the same parts. I'm using all the same lines. This is a 1/4 inch fuel line, and that goes into a 1/4 inch Barb T line, and then that goes into the external breather. It's a Spectre, I believe that's what they call it, and I'm gonna have the links in the description. And like I said, I already made this video. I'll just provide all the parts again in the description in case you guys were wondering. And like I said, you could reuse your stock air breathers bolts. You could always order these parts at your local dealership and it'll work just fine. So this is where I kind of provide a few tips. You just use a little zip tie, make sure it's just touching the fuel line, and that just gives you a little bit more resistance while you're pulling it and putting it inside. And that's just kind of when it blows off, it doesn't kind of shoot the line out. But I don't think you would have to worry about it, mainly because the air filter does touch the breather bolt and the hose line. So it's not perfect, but like I said, you don't have to cut into your air breather. So just something to kind of note. And I believe this looks fine. I don't know, you guys go ahead and leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. You guys think this looks good, or would you prefer drilling into the backing of the air breather. I don't know, you guys go ahead and leave your comments down below, but this is another thing that like I mentioned, you just evenly tighten down the bolts. Do not go crazy on one side. You want to make sure it's fully seated before you start cranking down on it. And right here I'm using zip ties to kind of hold the hose kind of behind the air filter. It looks a little funky with it kind of running alongside of the air breather. You can leave it like that, but I just decided to kind of clean it up a little bit, and I went ahead and I used a zip tie, and I'm attaching it to one of the sensors, one of the wires in the back. And here's a close-up of what you could see. If you guys also notice, I moved the line on the left a little bit just to make sure it's not pinching anywhere. So just when you're installing the cover, the teardrop, just make sure you're not pinching anything. If you have to, it's just a little bit, just move it out of the way, and then fully seat the teardrop cover on the bike. And as you can see, it looks great. I'm a big fan of this air breather. I'm gonna tell you guys, you know what, it does perform just like the Trask. It performs a lot better than the Screaming Eagle, than the one they give you, that 114 ventilator one. It's just comparing that to these aftermarket air breathers, it is the difference of night and day. Like I said, I don't have the money and the funds to kind of get this dyno tuned like other content creators, but just take it from me, you do feel the difference. And this is a street tuner from Screaming Eagle, so I don't have a crazy tuner or anything like that, but I could definitely feel the difference on the bite, on the butt dyno for sure. But you guys just let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? Like I said, I really like this air filter, and just stay tuned for the other parts of the series. You guys just stay out there, stay safe, don't believe everything you read, life's a risk, get out there and ride. Later.